was better not to advertise it too much. And we knew that if something bad happened, the government, the state, the police will not protect us. Plus, I'm one of 8 and one of 6 sisters. And then we had the double yummy of being, in my case, I'm talking about myself, of being a Jew in a Muslim country and a girl in a Muslim country, where girls were treated horribly and they had no right to anything. So the fact that, for example, I was wearing Western clothes didn't go well with them because their women were all covered up, as we see all over now. So they felt that they could touch us, call us prostitute, expose themselves to us. So as a girl, was not easy. Was not easy for anybody, but as young girls were even more difficult. Fammi qualche altra domanda.
So yours was not the first generation in Libya. Who are the indigenous people of Libya, since indigeneity has become such a watchword of our times? Yeah. Are they the Arabs?
No, the indigenous were the Berbers. And interestingly enough, we, the Jews, came with the Berber, or some say even before the Berbers. So
thanks to the Romans. This is going back to Roman times.
To Roman times.
So 2,000 years roughly.
So basically the Arabs stole Libya from the Berbers, talking about people who colonized or whatever. They did. They stole it from the Berbers, and the Berbers were decimated, and we stayed there basically until 1967. And this was my story. Okay, my family was there, I think maybe three generations. They came from Spain, from the thing of Spain.
No, 3 centuries.
3 centuries.
4 centuries.
That's why I need him here.
Yeah.
And so we were there, and as I said, life was almost normal. Oh, Libya. The way I remember Libya, Tripoli, because I left in 1967, the way I remember it is, if you forget the fact that I was a Jew, Libya at the time was a very rich country. We were number 7 in petrol. We were exporting petrol all over the world. We had the American base, the British base. We had a big Italian influence. So it was basically, even though maybe the world considered it, it was a kingdom. So I still remember going to the festivity for the king. And even though for the world was a third world place, it was not. It was very civilized, etc., considering until and this is where it comes to what happened to us. But then, as it happened in most places, we had the influence of the guy from
Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt. And the interesting thing to see, which I always remind me of these times now, is that Libya was extremely rich and Egypt was extremely poor. It's like if you want to compare, just to give you an idea, Libya was the United States and Egypt was Mexico. So if Libya needed workers, they will bring them from Egypt, etc. But there was an incredible influence by Gamal Abdel Nasser, who wanted to create a Pan-Arab world, and he wanted to be the leader. So what he did, what most Muslim leaders do, is you have to find a scapegoat, and that was the Jews. So I remember as a child going to the movie and see the
The newsreels.
The
younger people may not know what that is, but before the feature film, there would be newsreels from around the world, black and white, grainy.
And we, the Jews, will sit there petrified, and first they will show the king, and nobody cared, the king will come there, and then they will show Nasser. And his word always ended up and started with the word the Zionist enemy, and we could see all these Arab, the boys, because girls didn't go, just stand up like with this hatred, with this thing, and the brainwashing started. And so, unless I forgot something that you want to ask me, and so before 67, like 2-3 weeks before the war, I remember things already were very bad. I remember we couldn't go to school.
Okay, stop before we get to 67, which is a critical year. I want to dial back because, first of all, much of the propaganda we hear about this issue when it comes up is, hey, everything was perfect between Muslims and Jews and Arabs until 1948. It was the creation of the State of Israel, and even then things were great, but Israel instigated issues in all the Arab countries in order to force the Jews to leave. So it's not our fault, it's the Jews' fault, and it's Israel's fault. Have you heard that before, any of you? Okay, what do you say to that?
It was bullshit. Sorry. Something went. So
that word will now be on television as well, unless it's censored.
So no, absolutely. That you could see that the anger, the thing. By the way, I remember still as at my age, going to a party with my mother, and I swear to God this is true, surrounded, my mother had friends, my mother had a lot of affection for the Muslim. In fact, in our family, we always say that she's a Taliban who thinks she's a Jew, because she was basically raised by them. And I was at this party, and there were all these young girls my age. And I remember looking at me without words, with such hatred, that I remember I put my head down, because I don't know if anybody feel it, just with eyes, that if eyes can kill you. It was basically, it was they drank it in their mother's milk. But anyway, so there was already this negative energy. We didn't go to school. I remember going with my sister in the street, and 3 Arab guys were walking, and usually, I don't know, they will try to touch her breast or touch her behind or expose themselves. That was their modus operandi. Instead, they decided
with women that were non-Muslim.
Yeah, that they dressed the Western style, but this time that they didn't want to do anymore. They prefer something stronger to show their feeling. So I remember they did that. And I remember being very scared, and we rushed home. And so this is Tim.
Okay, but before, again, 67 is the pinnacle, but in 1948, when Israel was established, there were roughly 39,000 Jews in Libya. Libya itself had a very small population, so Jews were probably close to 2% of the population. And as my wife said, it was a very wealthy country, and a huge country geographically, with enormous potential. But by 1951, when Libya became an independent nation, all but about 5,000 of the Jews had left. Your family stayed. They didn't leave. The others left because they anticipated and were frightened. Why did your family stay? And I understand you were only born in 51, but why did your family stay? Did they trust the new country?
I think that maybe the trust and then force of inertia. You know, whenever people ask me that, I said this is a question that one can say to every Jew who stayed. What about the Jews that stay in Europe when the Nazis were advancing? What about the Jews that stayed in Lebanon, in Egypt? This is a question that doesn't have an answer. What about maybe in 80 years they will say, why the Jews stayed in London or stayed in Paris or even in New York? This is the history of the Jews. I don't know if there will be an answer. I cannot tell you an answer also because I never asked my parents, and then as life
and now it's
goes,
too late.
then they're not here to answer. But my father is one of 9, my mother is one of 4, and my father, out of 9, we stayed, 4 boys out of 9, 5 moved to Israel, and my mother, out of 4, only 2 stayed in Libya, and 2 went to Israel.
So by 1951, half the family was already gone.
Yeah, they were escaping, by the way. They were escaping by boat, and we could never talk to them. Never. So if they want to write to us, they write to, we always have a friend in Rome or in Milano, and they will write to this friend, and the friend will write to us. I remember my Aunt Ruth, her name de guerre was Luigi. So if we got a letter from Luigi for Milano, we knew that was our aunt.
But in these 16 years from 1951 to 1967, was there religious life? Could you go to a synagogue?
Yeah, we went to synagogue, but it's very difficult to explain. You knew you went to a synagogue, you knew not to linger. They let you go to the synagogue, but God forbid you will wear a Magen David. The boys that did the bar mitzvah, they did it at home. And if they had their books, to go and study before the bar mitzvah, we didn't have bat mitzvah. The girl at that time, the book were hidden. So that's the point, that if there is anybody here from an Arab country, or maybe from Russia or whatever, it's this life where you think you are free because you know how to deal with the little freedom that you are allowed.
But also because you've said before, Juju, because you didn't have any other life. You didn't know any other life. So the abnormal, you said, becomes normalized.
Yeah, we didn't know better, so we just dealt with it. But anyway.
But the Libyan constitution of 1951 was in some respects as good as any constitution in the West.
Yeah,
lots of guarantees, lots of promises. Could Jews live equally from 1951 to 1967 under the law?
Under the law, but they didn't respect any of the things that they supposedly promised. For example, Jews, we didn't vote. We never had an Arab, a Libyan passport. If you had to open a business, you had to have a Muslim with you who had to own
51%.
51%. So as I say, it was basically non-freedom, and we accepted it.
Until 1967. Okay, now let's talk about the critical weeks and months leading up to the Six-Day War and what happened.
So basically, as I say, the energy, we could feel that something was wrong. And we were hiding, we were talking to each other. And then the day that the war broke, I'll say...
June 5th.
Yeah. Everything, they were all prepared, and hell broke loose. We had a house with a garden, and this group that maybe were hundreds, maybe were thousands, in my eyes there were thousands, they came into our house, and basically this is why to me what happened in Israel October 7 resonates a lot. I mean, my sisters and I, my brother, we talk about it all the time because we witnessed it. It happened to us even though we were saved. They basically entered and they wanted to burn us alive. They had their thing and they started, and what saved us is, I told you, my mother was raised by them. She was raised by the Arabs, so she knew how to talk to them, And what she did two very smart things, which later on I realized how brilliant she was. She pushed my father away, because he's a Jew, you know, a man, and us, the four girls that at the time we were 17, 16, 15, and 14, you know, they were one after another. And that was an age which I did not realize it at the time, where we could have giving them bad idea, considering that rape for them is part of... So she hid us, we could hear, but she pushed us, and she confronted them, basically saying, we did nothing to you, we don't even know where Israel is, we are Arab. Don't tell me how it happened, but my mother, when she described it, she said it was like a miracle. And they put the cerino,
The match.
the match inside, and one of them said, leave them. So of course, we also knew the guy, I never understood, doesn't matter. And she immediately called a friend of ours, an Arab, a Muslim, a wonderful, wonderful man who used to come and listen with my father to Kalsum, which you must know who Kalsum was.
Very famous singer.
A very famous singer, and this is why...
And an anti-Zionist.
An anti-Zionist. And my mother said, doesn't matter. She said, please, you have to come and save us. And by then they did the curfew, because we did not realize, but they burned a lot and they killed some Jews, and thank God we didn't know it. So I remember he sent us, he was a kind of an aristocrat almost. He sent us his driver, and we all wore like burqas, including my father, you know, to cover our eyes, and he brought us to his house. And so we went and lived in his house. And I want to tell you this to show you how, as the French say, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And I feel this now since October 7, but even before, I cannot believe this gaslighting, this lie that everybody is buying it, because I witnessed it, but I thought only people in the third world can buy such lies, but instead it happened. So we were at the house of this guy, and this villa, and I remember my mother with us, the girls, was one section, listening only to their little radio, listening to the news in Arabic. And my father was on the other side of the villa with the owner, and he had TVs, of course. He had the BBC, he had the Italian thing, he had the French one, and one day, maybe a week after we were there, I sneaked to see my father on the other side. And I remember he said, how are you doing? He's sitting there watching TV in a good mood, and I tell him, Papa, how can you be in such good mood? Our mother is crying. He said, why? Thank God we are saved. And I said, because the Arab news in the radio from the Arab station is saying that Israel was completely destroyed and every Israeli is dead. And I never forget, he told me, go to your mother and whisper to her that they are lying, that this was one of the biggest victory, and that Israel won in few days. And I never forget, and he told me smiling, and the Egyptians are running in the desert in the hot sand without shoes. So I went to my mother and I told her. Another thing that happened, that again, one see again the brainwashing there, is that my mother, who could read them, after about a week, 10 days, she told me, go to your father and tell him to find an excuse and we want to go home. So I said, but why? We're okay here. He said, I know. He's a wonderful man. His wife is wonderful. The children, they were boys. They are already completely brainwashed. If we stay here longer, the children are going to sell us out, even if that risks the life of their father. And so we took, and I remember my mother said, if I have to die, I'd rather die in my own house. house. And so she found an excuse, and then we went home. And anyway, I'll be very quick in that. And the good thing that helped us, because the only people who could help us is Israel. Can you imagine? We couldn't even say we know Israel. So with our luck, there was an Italian ambassador. Tell me if I'm forgetting something. There was an Italian ambassador who took pity on us, and he managed to get us an exit visa, all the Jews to go to stay in Italy. And we all went to
all the
Italy.
Jews except those who were killed in '67. And there were several dozen, including people you knew,
including
who were murdered by mobs.
Yeah, and the other thing was interesting is that I'll tell you about the families, is what they did, which was almost a sick joke. They came to us, the police, and they said, look, we don't know what to do with you. We cannot save you, so you have two choices. You either live with 30 pounds per family, per person, $30, let's say, in one suitcase, or we have a camp, you can stay in the camp. So no one Jew stayed. We are going to stay in this camp, just let us go, 30 pounds or not 30 pounds. The other thing is to show you also the influence of Egypt, is that what they did, and thank God we were saved, really, you have to believe in miracles. And I'm very cynical about all this, but you start believing. The families who were killed, including, somebody was telling us that when they went into this forest, there were all these bodies and a little doll and a child. You know, history repeats itself. The Egyptians, because there was a lot of influence of the Egyptians there, not that the Libyans were much better, but the Egyptians were pushing. The Egyptians went there and pretended to be police and said, come, we'll take you to safety. And some families, to be nice, they had neighbors that they were Jews, so they knocked and they said, come, come, they're taking us to safety. So instead of one family dead, there were 2 or 3.
And you knew some of them?
I knew some of them. One, a family, there were 7 boys, beautiful, beautiful family, but you know, it's... Anyway, so you have other questions?
I have lots of questions, and I'm sure you. So you were offered safe passage.
We offered safe passage to Rome.
And by the time you and the others left, how many Jews remained in Libya?
You mean now or by the time we left?
After.
Nobody, but then what happened, people needed money, so some people, including my mother, decided to go to try to save some. And they were prisoners there basically for almost 1 year, house arrest, and a guy who now lives in Israel, who was in jail for almost 6-7 years. And then finally he was liberated.
How many Jews live in Libya today?
Nobody, none, nobody.
No one?
No one.
As far as you know, because you stayed in touch with some Libyan Arab families that were friendly, is there any memorial, memory, evidence that Jews ever lived in Libya?
No, in fact, I'm part of a group of Libyan Jews, because I'm part of a group of Libyan Jews, and we write, etc. And this wonderful man who's trying to bring back all the foods and everything, they created a virtual cemetery that you can reach by virtually,
online.
And everybody, let's say, I get the name of my grandfather, of my uncle, a young man who died at the age of 33, like 5 months before this happened. And the interesting thing, though, is that I'm part of this group, and everybody says we feel terrible for those who died. But for us, forget that we lost our money. We couldn't bring our dog, Bobby. We left him there. It was the best thing at the end that happened because finally we reached freedom. We knew what freedom was. You know, you don't know what it was, and then all of a sudden you know it. And
do you have any desire later in life now to return and visit?
No, to visit what? The place is destroyed. In fact, I met somebody the other day who travels a lot in Libya. He's
a Brit. He's a Brit.
He's a Brit, but his job is to protect those. And he said the place is in shambles, but what is interesting to me is that, Libya, we had magnificent old, come si dice, antiquity.
Roman antiquities. Leptis Magnus.
Yeah, Leptis Mania, Sabrata, and they are still there. And
so how do you feel every day, because you're a news junkie, every day you hear someone somewhere referring to Palestinian refugees, and you turn on all the news media, the TV outlets and others, you never hear anything about the story of 850,000 Jews. Libya, not a single Jew. Algeria, not a single Jew. Sudan, not a single Jew. I can keep going along a very long list in an arch that takes us all the way to Afghanistan, and no Jews. How do you feel?
It's very interesting because up to last year, before October 7, I think you asked me and then I was interviewed somewhere else, and I said that in a way the fact that people like my family and people from Lebanon, from Morocco, from Tunisia, they did not talk. I always use this expression, our revival, our victory to what was done to us became almost our own defeat, because nobody knows about us. You understand? Everybody just here. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night where I couldn't sleep, I just had this other idea that no, the reason we survive is because we fight for life. We do not let rancor or hatred run our life. I heard there is I hope I'm not getting confused, if not my husband will translate. There is an African proverb that says, serving hate or rancor for your enemies is like drinking poison, hope that the enemy dies. And I think this is the difference between us and the Palestinian and the rest of the Arabs who hate us, is that they are so much living in this hatred, they cannot give it up, that they are dying little by little and killing some of us with them, because when they have, we decided to say, look, the Libyan Jews, we went to Rome, nobody helped us. I went to work, honest to God, I was 16. And you have to realize 16 coming from the third world is like now being 12. It's not the 16 of now. We arrived the 14th of July. The 18th of July I went to work, me and my sister. And the rest, the Roman Jews, the Jews from Rome gave us a job in a store. I remember the first shock when they said you have to clean the floor. And I went to my father and I said, but if they're teaching me to sell clothes, why do I have to clean the floor? And he said, because this is it, do it. And they pay us nothing. But we went to work. We never became the victim. We were crying about what we left, but then we wanted to live, we wanted to survive. We still love their music, we still love their food. We try to take from this lemon, to use an American expression, we try to make lemonade. And this is why part of me wish all of you knew more, and if I had a wish is that if you didn't know it, to pass it along and to maybe have more people that are willing to talk. I'm not the only one, and some of them are talking. Are some writing books? No.
There have been just a few books.
But and to pass it along. But my message is of positivity, of loving life, of not being a victim. And unfortunately, though, I am not a psychiatrist, but people love victims, so nobody can like us. You know, I always say these keys that because to me the Palestinians have these keys. You know, this is my mother key. This is the story of the keys.
The keys.
Yeah, and I'm saying the other day, I said I wish they go to the United Nations, not that I trust them, and put 2 bags and said, here the Arab Jews put the keys, and you the Palestinian put your bloody keys, and see who has more keys.
Right.
You understand? That is what. Okay, I finished.
So I'll bring you in on a little family secret. For my work, over many years, I traveled a lot in the Arab world, often very quietly. And every once in a while, I would say to my wife, do you want to come? And this began 1975, we first met. And it was not until about 3 or 4 years ago, so that's 45 years, that my wife finally said yes for the very first time. I will come with you, which was almost like an earthquake in our own family relationship. And the trip was going to take us, we went on actually separate trips. We went to Saudi Arabia, I went for work. We went to the UAE, and we went to Bahrain. So how did that sit with you after 45 years of saying, I can't go back, it's too traumatic, I'm still suffering from that vision of mobs with torches who wanted to burn our house down with us inside? What happened on those trips?
It goes back to what I was just telling you, that we let go of rancor and hatred. So it's interesting, David was shocked. It was almost healing to listen to the language, even though my Arabic, I would like to improve it, but to listening to the Arabic, to their food, they're very, very friendly, the Arab. I always say they either cut your neck or they love you to death. No offense, but this is reality. And no, it was in a way healing. And even Saudi Arabia was interesting. I hope I'm not wrong. I'm positive about Saudi Arabia. I think they are almost on the way of changing. And no, it was very good to go. But remember, that was not Libya. I knew I was going in a safe place. I mean, Abu Dhabi now.
But you wouldn't have gone there 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And another thing that I'll share, hoping you'll respond, was after the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, I've known this woman since 1975. We have children, we have children-in-law, we have grandchildren. I have never seen my wife react as emotionally as after the invasion of, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Why? Why? I remember the middle of the night.
Yeah. Because I felt for the women. You see, you have to be a woman who live in a Muslim world, who doesn't wear the burqa, and we don't know what happened to them inside closed door, to understand how women are treated. And I felt I was lucky because I was mistreated and I saw freedom. Sorry, I don't know, you mentioned that. And the Afghani girls, they had it for 10 years, and then it lost. To me, it was so painful. But what can we do? I mean, this is one of the many mistakes of the stupid West who don't know history and then they try to get involved. Anyway, ask me another question.
Okay, I'll ask maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then hopefully the audience will have questions. So, you said the stupid West, and it's not the first time I've heard my wonderful wife say the stupid West, the naive West, the illusory West. Why is the West stupid? What are we missing? What are governments missing? What are the people missing in understanding this part of the world from your perspective? Why stupid?
Well, I'm not here to discuss politics. I'm just here to tell my story. But,
So,
but what I...
But you introduced the term "stupid West,"
I know.
and that's not a, Republican, Democrat, or Labor, Tory. Why the stupid West?
I want just to say one thing, and I send it to a lot of friends. I watch reels because I don't watch to watch TV, where they give you little pieces of speeches or whatever. And there was this guy with all his thing from either Abu Dhabi and he was speaking to an American audience in Arabic with a translator. And at a certain point he said, I need to tell you this in English. And the translator said, no, sir, I can translate. And he said, I know you can translate, but it's very important for me to say it in English. And he said, I cannot quote him verbatim, but basically the point is, he said, listen to me. All the terrorism, all the stuff that will happen will come from now on from the West. The West is going to allow it all because the West did not understand the Middle East, and they continue making one mistake after mistake. And I agree with him. And the other thing, for example, I didn't come to all the lectures. Sorry, Charles. There are other things to do. But a lot of the things, and please tell me if I missed it, I saw the people talking about what's happening to Israel. And if you ask me, Israel is a terrible thing. People die. People will die again. My sister called us today. I have two sisters, told us, please relax. We're trying to go on with our life, but we know something is going to happen, because Hania was killed. But the West, we are in such danger, and we don't see it. And I give you an example. We Jews, they start with us. Look at Libya, I told you. The rich country, we had the British, we had the American, we had the Italian, what happened? They got rid of us, and then the Italian were there. And now if you go, so they killed some Italian, I don't know what happened to the British.
Well, you may remember ISIS in Libya.
Oh, yeah.
And the Christians who were forced to kneel, who were blindfolded, and what was his name, Jihad John, or whatever his name was, with a machete, beheaded all of them. My guess is that they went looking for the Jews. The Jews were gone by 1967, fast forward 35, 40 years. So the Saturday people were gone. So who was next? The Sunday people. The Sunday people. I think that's what you're trying to say.
100%.
So if the Sunday people think they're safe because this is only about the Saturday people, I think what you're saying is reevaluate.
Yeah.
Reevaluate.
And I feel like we are all in a deep sleep. And my mother always say, if you are sick, before you go to a doctor, go to a person that was sick before you. I'm sorry, I keep repeating that. I feel, honestly, that I survived a terrible epidemic like COVID, but worse than COVID. And now, this epidemic is hitting the West, and the people don't realize it. The people said, oh, it's a cold, let me take 2 aspirin. Oh, it's a cold. And I'm telling, and I want to scream, no, it's an epidemic. Do something before it's too late. And this is what, poor David, sometimes he doesn't smoke, he pretends to say, I'm going out to buy cigarette just because it's overwhelming to be with me. I'm always so angry because I feel like I'm screaming, and there are a lot of friends I cannot talk with. I cannot talk with them. I mean, I'm sure after October 7, a lot of people lost friends, and they live, the world live in this.
Okay, my last question, and then I turn to you. What does Israel mean in all of this to you? I mean, you have 2 sisters who moved there. One went as a lone soldier. They've been there for 50 years, 3 generations. Fate did not take us to Israel, but I know you pretty well. Israel is is not a hobby of yours. It's in your milk, the mother's milk. It's in your bloodstream. Why?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Because, first of all, because Zionism is, I don't know, as you say, I just said before, for the Muslim, the hatred for the Jews, they take it from their mother milk. For us, is Zionism, this country represents everything for us. And also, which is interesting, is that I see the difference, for example, vis-à-vis Israel, between the Libyan Jews, the French Jews, the English Jews, and the American Jews. The American Jews live into this bubble in which they feel this is our country, nothing will ever happen to us. We never had this luxury, which now it might come to help us, when we know that at the end is like having only one mother who loves you. We have only this country. And we know what happened to the Jews without this country. So Israel, I cannot even, it's like you telling me, why did you have kids? Do you like your kids? It's very difficult to explain.
Well, that's a whole other discussion. Depends on the day of the week. Okay, can we take some, oh, wow. Wow, okay.
So the story of the 850,000 Jews who were victims of pogroms at North Africa, the Levant, is Uterine. The Jews don't know it enough, and the Jews don't show it enough. And I don't know if this is an Ashkenazi Mizrahi thing, or if the Holocaust overshadowed everything. But it seems to me that we don't do enough to tell the story. We don't have memorials. We don't have museums about it. There seems to be this, when the Holocaust is the standard of anti-Semitism, it's very hard to recognize anything beneath it. So I just wonder what more we can do. We've got to educate the world, and we've got to educate Jews about it.
First of all, I think it will be unfair of me, I suppose you're Ashkenazi, right? It would be unfair of me to expect other people to do what we didn't do. And I don't know why we didn't do it. I think it's something to do also with the way we were brought up. Remember, we came from third world country. And there was something in that. I remember one of the things when I married David, American Jew, and my first cousin, married a guy from
St. Louis.
An American.
St. Louis.
St. Louis, Missouri. And when we were talking to each other about how it is to be married to American, I remember we said, they're so obnoxious. Everyone, I'm Jewish, I'm Jewish, I'm Jewish. Shut up already. Because it's true, by the way, because we were so. It's very difficult to come out of this. Come say this
shell.
This shell. I think that's one of the reasons.
Do you understand what? We had the luxury as Jews in the West of being able to be very public about who we are, our stories. They came from a culture where they had to be very private and almost secretive.
That's why we didn't talk. But
by the way, also there was no university in Libya at that time.
But they were in other.
No, but I mean, in other words, even the level of education, unless you went abroad, if you could.
Yeah.
So it's very different from people like Albert Einstein coming from Germany to America and going straight to Princeton.
I think Arab Jews, our forte was business, and we went to country. You see, American became, the Ashkenazim, they become piano concerto and doctors, etc. We become, and there are some, for example, if you go to Israel, there is a museum of Libyan Jews, very nice, I forgot the name. So that was the question. But
there's no legacy in Libya, and now we're beginning to see in the UAE we see a synagogue, a beautiful synagogue. So there's some effort in some places, but not others. One of the differences here is that Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, post 1949, and Konrad Adenauer as chancellor, acknowledged what happened. And Germany established, in a way, almost a unique model in modern history of acknowledging and taking responsibility. By contrast, it took Austria 40 years until 1990 when its chancellor began the confrontation with its past. What's my point? Libya does not acknowledge the issue. Libya does not engage even in its own internal debate about the fate of 2% of the population who vanished from their country. As I said, there are no monuments, memorials, or museums. And you'll hear in social media, again, what I said earlier. There was no issue, everything was hunky-dory, it was perfect. Along came Israel, the Mossad instigated everything. They have their own storyline. And in the world in which we live, half the world is ready to believe it without ever meeting my wife or even watching the video of this program. I think there has to be much more relationship building among the many victims of the intolerance, the tyranny that has taken place in much of MENA, the Middle East and North Africa. And whether it's Assyrian Christians or Maronite Christians, and whether it's Baha'i, and whether it's Kurds, by the way, and whether it's Muslims who have come and very courageously said that we cannot endorse this kind of repression, and just as as a product of the Cold War, we needed Soviet dissident voices, people like Natan Sharansky, whom you heard from on Sunday, who spent 9 years of his life in the Gulag in order to tell a largely gullible Western world that the communism of reality was very different from the socialism of their dreams. So, to me, that's the absolute first thing. And the second thing is to make sure that those who not only care about the Jews, but defend liberal democracy, understand that the stakes involved are way bigger than the Jews. And I reject the notion of the canary in the coal mine, which is often sort of descriptive of the Jews. And the reason I reject it, not because it's not accurate, because I'll be damned if I'm going to die from methane gas to let others in the Western world live. I'm not playing that role. My wife is not playing that role. Our children, our soon-to-be 8 grandchildren, are not going to play that role either. I would say facetiously, let someone else play that role, or even more importantly, let's all construct a world where that's not necessary, but maybe that's a utopian idea. But it's a time to roll up our sleeves, to partner, to stand up. The stakes couldn't be higher. The stakes couldn't be higher. The gentleman asked whether Islam is supposed to be a religion that practices tolerance toward other religions. So the fact that it's not, he's saying in some countries, is that a problem of Islam or is it a problem of something else? Did I get that more or less right, sir?
By the way, sir, I don't know, I cannot answer you, but I'm going to tell you as a black person, do you know, and here we have another who lived in the Middle East, do you know how the Arabs call the blacks? They call them slaves. It took me a while to understand.
The Arabic word.
The Arabic word is slave, and for example, we all see Abdul Rahman. You know, if you go, we went to this magnificent mosque in Dubai or Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi, magnificent.
And it says, I don't know if anybody's Muslim here, God has 99 names. And the 99 name are Rahman, which means the merciful, Abdel Hamid, the loving, and all are Abdel Hamid, Abdel Rahman, which is the slave or the slave of God. Abdullah is the slave of God. So the point is that just to answer you, this is a culture that has no respect for minorities, and the moment we accept it and we are not PC, I think we cannot solve the issue until we tell the truth, and nobody's willing to tell the truth. You understand? And if you say the truth, you are Islamophobic, you had that. No, they are very xenophobic. There is a lot of ignorance. I mean, you say the statistic of how many books are written or translated in the Middle East. It's scary. It's scary that there is no desire for culture. There is, and who is the biggest victim of all of this? The Arab themselves. The Arab themselves, because few group, they have, all the power, and the rest are being rendered slaves. So I don't know how to answer you, but I hope I taught you something that you will share about how they call the blacks, because that also is not well known.
But sir, let me just amplify. Number one, what my wife is referring to is the 2003 UN Arab Human Development Report, UN Arab Human Development Report, which spoke about three major deficits in the Arab world: a democracy deficit, a gender deficit, and a knowledge deficit. And under the knowledge deficit, I don't remember now all of the data, but the number of books translated from foreign languages into Arabic, in the last, 50, 100 years is fewer than the number of languages translated into Spanish in 1 year. I mean, there are many of these sort of data points. I'm not going to get them exactly right. That's number one. Number two, I think we have to say in fairness here, in absolute fairness, just as we can't speak about the Jews, we cannot speak about the Islamic world or the Arab world monolithically. And as we pointed out, countries like Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. On Sunday evening, I spoke about majority Muslim countries like Azerbaijan, and I can go through Central Asia and Albania and others. There are variations, but allow me to say the third point. For those of you who've studied sort of Westphalian 17th century Western history, that as long as there is no separation between religion and state, I mean, if you want to get to the core of issues, then, and by the way, to be fair, in the Jewish world, in the state of Israel, this remains an ongoing issue about the nature of the relationship between the state and religion. However, until now, there is a degree of separation, not full, but a degree of separation in Israel. It's a separate discussion, but minorities live protected. We see the evidence of that. But forgive me, but religion cannot remain pristine pure to your ideals when it's engaged with religion. And I would say that about Jewish, Islamic, Christian. Power corrupts. Politics corrupts. It distorts. It destroys the nobility in so many respects of the aspirational beliefs of religion. So as long as, Chaim, help me, I think all but Lebanon, I believe in the Arab world, have an official religion, then, and I'm not even speaking about non-Arab Muslim majority countries, then inevitably, when you said, sir, at the beginning, the vision of Islam as you understand it will be hijacked or kidnapped or corrupted because of the exigencies of decision-making and government and interest politics. So which is it? Is it a religion or is it a political philosophy governing states? The two of us, I'm sure, care like you about anti-Semitism and its urgency. I think both of us, though, we kind of flip the process. If it's only about anti-Semitism, it's largely about Jews fighting anti-Semitism. And one of the points I tried to make on Sunday evening was the more we try to narrow or proprietize, if there's such a word, anti-Semitism as a Jewish issue, the more we run the risk of facing a growing problem. Not enough people in the world care enough to actually do something, not just say, yeah, it's terrible, but do something. I think the only way is to remind people, as Naya said, on the Columbia campus, they burned the American flag. On the Yale University campus, they replaced the American flag with the Palestinian flag. And on that statue, I think it was at Columbia, they wrote, Hamas is coming. And it's not just about the Jews. Remember this conversation, you're much younger than we are. It's not just about the Jews.